brother-in-law, Dror, is still held hostage in Gaza. He joins us now. Good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon, Joe.
This must be a bittersweet day for you, the release of two hostages, but more still held in captivity.
Yeah, I think it's a good way to describe it. So obviously we are delighted for the families of the two hostages that were not released but rescued. And we are concerned not just for Dror, but for the 134 other hostages that still held by Hamas.
Dror, since he was taken on October 7th?
No, just that there are indications that he's hostage, but not who is the kidnapper, not anything about his condition.
No one has heard for his condition.
No.
Some hostage families have made very clear that they believe the release of their relatives should be
I agree that it needs to be a priority, but I don't agree that you should lessen the military action against Hamas, because as far as I'm concerned, the only way to bring Hamas to the negotiation table with some sensible demands, not fanciful demands, is through Israel applying more military pressure on them. So yes, I think it should be a priority, but I think the two goes hand in hand.
that military pressure that you speak of may have produced results. It may have got that original ceasefire back in November that saw 100 hostages released. It is also producing terrible numbers of civilian deaths. Do you ask yourself about those deaths and about the necessity of those deaths as part of the pressure to get Dror released?
I do every day. I think it's terrible that civilians are killed. And the numbers don't really matter. As long as one civilian who is not involved is being killed is enough. Is too much. So yes, I do think about it, and yes, I do feel the pain that the families of these people killed feel. But I don't see any other option when you have a terrorist organization that controls this territory, use these people as human shield. You have a country, Israel, fighting for its existence against this terrorist organization. So it's just a very, 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 very painful and unfortunate situation.
That's right. Thank you very much for coming on the way. As Israel celebrates two hostages returned, Gaza awaits the worst. There are thought to be 1.5 million Gazans now sheltering in the southern city of Rafah, the last major urban area to which Israel is turning its attention. The vast majority of that number have fled from elsewhere, moving south through the Gaza Strip ahead of the Israeli army. But south of Rafah, as we heard from a moment ago, is only the closed border with Egypt. There is nowhere else to go. 67 Palestinians are thought to have died in the overnight bombardment of Rafah. The total number of Palestinian dead from the conflict is 28,340. Both those figures from the Hamas-run health ministry in Gaza. Just before we came on air, I spoke to Hisham Mahana from the International Committee of the Red Cross. He's in Rafah. I asked him about conditions.
Unfortunately, the situation in Rafah, particularly from a humanitarian angle, is deteriorating further and further by the clock, especially with all the military rhetoric about extending the military operation to get into Rafah governorate. This governorate inhabits now over 1.5 million people. The vast majority of them are displaced in randomly in tents or makeshift tents. Vicious diseases are spreading amongst them due to the lack of access to proper health care, lack of hygiene, and the inavailability of having a decent personal space. They are on daily hustle to have access to adequate quantities of food, water that's suitable for human consumption. Some of them are basically using water from the Mediterranean. Um, they are also troubled with the increasing prices due to the massive inflation in the market. And given the limited quantity of humanitarian aid that is allowed into Gaza Strip, the lack of accessibility for the humanitarian workers because of the lack of security guarantees required for making to achieve the humanitarian response on the ground, this has all been contributing to deepening their suffering more and more. It's catastrophic.
Are you able to imagine the situation if there is a land offensive on Rafah and into Rafah?
Without all the adequate measures that entail basic principles of international humanitarian proportionality, distinction, and all the other measures, it would be disastrous, and the world will bear witness the killing of further 1,000 people whose lives could have been spared, because the humanitarian response is already very limited. We don't have space enough to operate. There is ongoing, constantly increasing humanitarian needs by the clock, especially in Rafah government. The roads are even impassable, not impassable like any longer. A driving distance that could take us 10-15 minutes, it now takes a couple of hours. There are lives hanging in the balance now as we speak. There's no further south in Gaza Strip beyond Rafah.
A spokesperson for the Israeli government has called on United Nations agencies to help evacuate civilians from war zones in Gaza. Are the agencies able to move significant numbers of civilians out of somewhere like Rafah? And is there anywhere for them to go if they can be moved?
The average displacement for any person now in Rafah is 5 times since October 7th.
They have moved 5 times, most individuals.
Yes. Some people have been displaced 10 times, and I don't see that they have any ability to keep them going at this pattern, which is why it's imperative now that adhering to the international humanitarian law is more needed than ever. There are hundreds of thousands of lives that are hanging in the balance now. The few remaining hospitals and Khan Younis governorate that are still struggling to maintain operational are being surrounded. They are going to turn into morgues if they are not replenished soon with the medical supplies, with the oxygen, with the food and fuel to keep their facilities running.
Again, if I can ask you this question of moving civilians, are the agencies that you liaise with able to move hundreds of thousands of people, even if they wanted to? And as far as you are aware, is there anywhere for them to go?
Well, from experience, we tried to facilitate the evacuation of a few people. Some of them were injured in ambulances, and that operation was highly sophisticated because it entailed a lot of security measures that were not all the time existed. Some of these missions, unfortunately, ended up with the killing of emergency medical response team members of the Palestinian Liberation Society. We have witnessed that over the past few weeks. So I cannot imagine that any international organization would have the capacity, the logistical preparations, and the security guarantees to evacuate hundreds of thousands of people, if not more than 1 million people. And plus, there's no destination to evacuate this large number of people to. There's nowhere in Gaza now that is equipped as a safe environment, safe area. So I see nowhere for people to go further than Rafah without another tragic situation.
That was Hisham Mahana from the International Committee of the Red Cross. There is a plan, a grand bargain as it's described, that would stop the war, see the hostages in Gaza released, have Israel diplomatically recognized by Saudi Arabia, and have an independent Palestinian administration running both the West Bank and Gaza. Amongst the problems with the plan, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who today promised to prosecute this war until what he called total victory. One man who struggled mightily to reach a deal with the Palestinian Authority when he was Israel's Prime Minister, he says he came within a hair's breadth, is Ehud Olmert, eventually toppled by a financial scandal that saw him serve time in prison. I asked the former Prime Minister first about the prospects for Rafah and whether he agrees with plans for a land offensive there.
I think it's very difficult. I think it's a very unique situation because there are so many civilians in Rafah. I wish that there would have been a greater international pressure on the Hamas to release the Israeli hostages. There are still 134 Israelis who are hostages. And I think that if there will be a movement in this direction, it will change the perspectives about the war in Rafah.
Do you agree with the Israeli Prime Minister, with Mr. Netanyahu, when he says that the hostage releases that we have seen so far have only come about as a result of the extraordinary military operation that Israel has put in place in Gaza?
There is nothing that Netanyahu says that I believe or that I trust or accept. However, having said that, it's obvious that to a certain degree the Israeli military operation may have influenced the Hamas to make the exchange in return for a few days of truce, which probably they needed. But even if it was somewhat true that the military pressure forced the Hamas to make the exchange then, it is not an evidence in any form or manner that it can be the same now. And I think that because the possible ramifications of the military operation in Rafah are far more dangerous and damaging to Israel, and I'm not certain that from a military point of view the outcome can be so helpful to us. We have to make a different consideration this time.
Would you like to see the military operation either ended or radically changed?
Yeah, I think that at this point, I think we have to stop the military operation, to make an agreement that will be brokered by Egypt, by Qatar, by America, whoever, to release all the hostages. It means that we have to then also agree to eventually pull out from Gaza. This is not something that I reject, in as long as there will be an international intervention force that will take the place of Israel in Gaza. We need to have a force that will try and block the return of Hamas into any position in Gaza, and that will help create a new civil administration that will take over the management in Gaza and will start the rehabilitation of Gaza.
All of what you say has been entirely ruled out by the Israeli Prime Minister, by Benjamin Netanyahu, who says there is no one to talk to, there is no two-state solution, and he will not finish the war until Hamas is destroyed and the hostages released.
That's precisely why I think that Netanyahu has to be removed from his position and the new government has to take over.
What is the prospect of that?
By normal parliamentary procedures, I am not certain that it's so soon. But measuring and feeling the growing rage in the Israeli public opinion, I think is something that is going to erupt sooner than most people think. And when it will erupt, nothing will stand in its way. And it will bring down the government and will force the early elections, which I presume will take place sometimes in the beginning of the second half of this year.
You have spoken of ending military operations, of the release of hostages, of creating some new form of government within Gaza. They are all the starting points of what is talked about as a grand bargain involving Saudi Arabia recognising Israel, about defence guarantees for Saudi Arabia, about a proper Palestinian state. Do you believe that such a grand bargain is possible or is it another peace plan that comes to the Middle East to die?
This is the greatest benefit for Israel that will match what may appear to some in Israel as a concession and as not a complete fulfillment of all the rhetoric and the arrogant expectations which the Prime Minister created from the very first day of this confrontation. The new axis made up of the Saudis and the Emirates and Bahrain and Jordan and Egypt and Palestine that will be created is such an important strategic change in the balance of power in the Middle East in favor of the Israeli interest that one must be completely reckless, irresponsible, and messianic to believe that he can destroy the Hamas, return the hostages, maintain the good relations with Egypt and Jordan, and prevent further terrorist confrontations in territories which are occupied by the State of Israel, and not lose the support of the international community, particularly guys like Biden and Rishi Sunak, and Macron and Scholz and others. I mean, this is crazy. Probably the only thing that stands on its way is Netanyahu. So he will have to go, and he will go, and he will go in disgrace.
Do you believe this grand bargain, this plan, is a genuine opportunity to emerge out of all the death and destruction of the past few months?
I think this is perhaps the only one.
That was Ehud Olmert, former Israeli Prime Minister. If you don't spend your life in amongst the swill of conspiracy theories about everything from 9/11 to the war in Gaza, you might have missed a popular theory amongst some supporters of the Palestinian cause. It's that the Israelis had good warning of the attacks of October the 7th and let the mass murder and rape and hostage-taking of that day go ahead so that they could then destroy and reoccupy Gaza. It is, of course, grotesque nonsense. It's also what Labour's candidate in the forthcoming Rochdale by-election, Azhar Ali, appeared to believe, right up until the point where his statements on the subject were published in the Mail on Sunday, and he suddenly saw the light, recanted and apologised. Well, the people of Rochdale are divided on what should happen next.
If he's apologised for it, maybe he's right, you know. I mean, you need to talk, not all this bombing and rioting all the time. You need to talk about it.
Probably he should stand down for what he said. There's a lot of different religions in the world.
I suppose he thinks he's supporting the Palestinians and that, and the town does have a big Muslim population. So whether that's going to make any difference or not, I don't know. It's always been a Labour stronghold, Rochdale, and that. So I don't think it'll make any difference.
Well, our BBC Manchester political reporter Kevin Fitzpatrick is in Rochdale. He joins us. Kevin, any sign of Mr. Ali?
No sign at all, and he's currently turning down all requests for interviews at the moment anyway, and the Labour Party is desperately trying to dampen down the fallout from this story after, as you say, it emerged at the weekend that Azhar Ali had been recorded soon after the October 7th attack by Hamas, saying that Israel had deliberately allowed it to happen to pave the way for their response. Now, he's issued a statement, a really strongly worded statement, apologising unreservedly, saying his comments were deeply offensive, ignorant and false. And we understand he's been busy trying to make contact with representatives of the Jewish community, including the Jewish Representative Council, among others, to express his regret and say sorry.
Kevin, what is the electoral background to this when it comes to the makeup of Rochdale?
Well, this is a by-election taking place at the end of the month. It follows the death of Labour MP Sir Tony Lloyd, and Labour is defending a healthy majority of 9,500, so a big head start, you would have thought, but the main parties are all standing here, lots of local independents as well, so there'll be worries in the party about how this row could affect its votes within the Jewish community, but at the same time it's also facing a battle to hold on to support Rochdale's large Muslim community. George Galloway is among the candidates here. One of his main campaign tactics is urging Muslims not to vote Labour or the Keir Starmer's failure to call for a ceasefire in Gaza. So Labour's under fire from all angles, and this latest development isn't going to help.
Kevin, thank you very much indeed. Kevin Fitzpatrick from BBC Manchester there, and of course a full list of candidates for the Rochdale by-election is available on the BBC website. Now, 1 in 5 migratory species are threatened with extinction, according to a new report from the United Nations. For migratory fish, the numbers are much worse, nearly all of them, 97% of them under threat. Kelly Walsh was the lead author of the report. She joins us now. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Why?
Well, there are many causes for decline in migratory species, but the report found that there are two key drivers of species loss. Habitat loss, primarily driven by agricultural expansion, and in the case of fish and many other species, overexploitation through hunting and fishing.
But all these things presumably could have happened to non-migratory species. What's the particular challenge for those that move around the globe?
Yes, that is true. These are similar threats that affect many species. But in the case of migratory species, as they move around, they also require multiple habitats as they traverse the globe, and also a collective action with the world's governments, because nature sees no borders. And so being able to have multiple countries that are coming together to help these species is really what's needed to help.
And have you got some species that are being hunted, used, I don't know, for food or for leisure hunting in jurisdictions where that wouldn't be allowed in other parts of the world? Is that one of the challenges?
So there is that challenge. I think the issue of illegal trade or use, but also just unsustainable use that might be legal, is a global issue, and one that both the conventional migratory species that's meeting this week, as well as other global treaties such as CITES, are working to grapple with. So there are these challenges.
You've got the convention, and you've got the meetings that go alongside it. Do you get anything close to agreement when you say to countries, look, you need to come alongside this country and bring your regulations in line, or is it a struggle?
So that is the goal. It's bringing these countries together and really having collective action for the species. And we hope that this week, with the launch of the State of the World's Migratory Species report, that this report will shed light both on the threats to these species, but also on the solutions to help governments prioritize key actions.
Kelly, thank you very much indeed. Kelly Walsh there. At the end of last year, 2/3 of the population of Afghanistan required some form of humanitarian assistance. So grim is it now in the country that the campaign group Human Rights Watch has sounded the alarm today over the state of healthcare there. Severely harmed, says the group, by the collapse in aid, by restrictions on freedom of movement, and by the governing Taliban's ban on the employment of women in humanitarian organisations. Here's Hika Alsman, a Médecins Sans Frontières medical coordinator based in Kabul. She works largely in mother and baby clinics, and she says they are lacking the most basic care.
We have seen that there has been a reduction of donor funds for Afghanistan, which means that many activities have been reduced. We see that there's a huge lack of basic health care. For access to health care, especially for women, it has been problematic, and that's also one of the reasons that we see in maternity pregnant women come in a late stage with a lot of complications.
Yes, and Laurie Bristow is the UK's former ambassador to Afghanistan, amongst other places, including during the withdrawal of British and American troops from the country in August 2021. Good afternoon, Sarah. Good afternoon. How has it got so bad so quickly, or was it already pretty bad and the withdrawal of troops and the collapse in humanitarian aid just pushed it over the edge?
Well, as the report says, I mean, the situation has been really dire, since the withdrawal in 2021 and the collapse of the internationally recognised government. To give a scale of the problem, as you said in the introduction, about 2/3 of the population need humanitarian assistance. We're facing this year about 50 million people who are suffering from food insecurity. This is just before you get to the Afghans who are in camps in other countries around the region. So the international community has provided a great deal of aid to Afghanistan, $5.5 billion over the last couple of years, but it's clearly not enough. and it's of course dwarfed by the vast sums that we spend over the 20 years of the campaign. But part of the problem here is how do you deliver aid and support the Afghan population without actually supporting the Taliban themselves?
Has anyone worked out how to do that?
Well, one of the reasons that the report is being published now is that the United Nations are holding a meeting on the 18th of February in Doha. And that really follows from a report that the UN asked a senior Turkish diplomat to produce last year on how to move this forward. So there's a widespread sense that nobody recognises the Taliban, nobody wants to recognise the Taliban under current circumstances. But the status quo is not going to help us deliver support to the people of Afghanistan, nor will it help the international community address the things that it's most worried about, particularly terrorism, counter-narcotics work, and of course large numbers of refugees and instability.
You appear to be suggesting that at some point the international community, whatever you want to call it, is going to have to bite the bullet and start working with the Taliban.
So that's really where the report of the Turkish diplomat comes in, Feridun Sinirlioğlu. So what is produced is a report that offers a roadmap towards some sort of normalisation. So in exchange for the way that the Taliban governs Afghanistan, in exchange for meeting its international obligations, particularly as regards the rights of women and ethnic minorities, which are wholly unmet in today's Afghanistan, and in exchange for some sort of proper dialogue within Afghanistan leading to more inclusive government, that would open up a pathway to normalisation and integration into the international community.
And do you get any sense from your observations that there is give and take on behalf of the Taliban, that they're ready to make concessions?
So the Taliban don't appear to be monolithic. The point here is not whether the Taliban or parts of the Taliban are reconstructed or reformed. They're not. The question here is whether we can nudge more pragmatic members of the Taliban towards changing their behaviour, particularly towards women and girls and towards ethnic minorities. And part of the point here from the Taliban side is that what they're doing to women and girls is hardwiring in poverty, failure of development, and a future really that looks about as bad as it does at present.
So Laurie, thank you very much indeed. So Laurie Bristow, former ambassador to Afghanistan. When the Kenyan runner Kelvin Kiptum ran the Chicago Marathon last year with a world record beating 2 hours and 35 seconds, it was pretty clear that the next generation of Kenyan marathon runners had emerged. Kelvin had only started running marathons professionally back in 2022. The next year, he won in London.
The fastest ever debutant, the fastest ever second half of a race. Well, he's done that and more here in London. He's going to win the London Marathon. It's a new course record for Kiptum, a new personal best, and the second fastest time ever in the history of world marathon running.
His future was bright. This year, the 24-year-old world record holder was all but confirmed to be on his way to the Olympics to run 26 miles and 385 yards for Kenya, a country that has carried away a startling number of marathon and long-distance trophies. But that journey from Nairobi to Paris was not to be. Kelvin Kiptum was killed last night in a car accident in western Kenya. Amos Kipruto is a Kenyan long-distance runner who's run alongside Kelvin. He won the 2022 London Marathon. Kiptum would go on to win in 2023. He gave me his reaction to the news.
It's really hurting everyone, and everyone is asking why Kiptum.
You ran alongside him, didn't you? What was that like?
Some Jewish moment we had with Kiptum in London. It was really nice, and we ran together. We ran side together, and really humble guy, someone who is hardworking in his career, and Kevin put effort in his career that everything is possible if you train smart, mentally, physically, and all you fit for the competition. And that is how Kiptum show everyone in the world that everything is possible and impossible is nothing.
Did he have a special way of looking at a race? Did he have a special way of approaching and running a marathon?
I came to understand Kevin was a really caring person. He was really making things to be easier. And he was there for every moment when I asked for any question, he was really answering for me. I remember when we met, Kevin told me that only what I need to be in a podium, which is a uniform or a universe for everyone, that when you enter somewhere or when you enter a race, you feel like you say, oh, today I want to try my best to be in a podium. And that's how Kevin find himself in a running in front, running his personal best, and it motivates me.
In the last big race he ran in Chicago, he did the marathon in 2 hours and 35 seconds. Do you think he would have got it below 2 hours?
Yes, I can say Kevin was really prepared for it. I remember on that day I was in a church. I find myself standing in front of everyone and cheering. You know, everything is capable for every man who is there for something who is needed in his career. We have lost a guy, we have lost someone who usually giving us to fight for every day, in every single moment, to see that we are going to run like him. Even me, I know Kevin was there. We are all going to meet with Kevin there, but you see, we have lost him. All over the world, who knows Kevin, who knows he was the world record holder, he was ratified recently. So it's dividing many things.
That was Amos Kipruto, the Kenyan long distance runner, and Aaron Finn is the author of Running with the Kenyans and joins me now. It's a terrible loss to lose someone at the beginning of such a glittering career, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the big tragedy, is that incredible as he has been, what things he's done, he was only just beginning. He'd only done 3 marathons. He ran his first marathon in December 2022. This year he had said, he'd come out and said if conditions are right, he said whether conditions are right, he was going to break the 2-hour marathon in Rotterdam in April. And he was that good that nobody batted him out. Nobody said they were crazy or arrogant. You know, it was just like, okay, Kelvin Kiptum says he can run that fast, we know he can. And then of course the Olympics was coming up. So yeah, it was just beginning, and it's a sort of tragedy for the sport as well as for him, Kenya.
The marathon baton seems to be passed rather frequently from one Kenyan to another. Have you worked out why Kenya is so good?
Well, yeah, I did spend 6 months out there trying to work out that question. And I came up with the conclusion that there's not just one single answer. It's kind of a combination of all the natural advantages we have with the landscape at high altitude, culture around Kenya, and Ethiopia, that whole region, and it's now expanding into Uganda. This whole culture where there's so much further for running, so much kind of support among the community for running. They all run together, they support each other, and they form these huge groups. They all train together, inspire each other. We just heard Amos Kipruto saying, you know, that he's inspired by Kelvin Kiptum. They kind of form this huge body of runners. There's so many of them, and that, you know, the greatest of all of those is going to be something very special.
Darren Amphin, thank you very much for our headlines. The Foreign Secretary Lord Cameron has called on Israel to stop and think seriously before it launches a ground assault on Rafah. Labour has defended its decision to keep campaigning for its candidate in the Rochdale by-election after he apologised for comments he made about Israel. PM is at 5. This is Johnny Diamond, and that's the world at 1:45.
Johnny, thank you. The studio engineers were Sarah Kimberley and James Piper. The editor is Sophie Walker. Well, now on Radio 4, we join the poet Paul Farley as he explores the symbolism and significance of loops and circles. Today, he considers what they meant to our Neolithic ancestors as he visits a 5,000-year-old stone circle in Cumbria and finds himself in the loop.
Walking in circles clockwise, but thinking of a world before clocks. I'm walking in circles, in orbits around a Neolithic roundabout. I'm walking in circles on a temporal roller coaster ride from past to present to future to past. I'm walking in circles and thinking about our place in the cosmos. I'm walking in circles, looping the loop, a strange loop, an infinite loop. I'm Paul Farley, and I'm in the loop. I've always been fascinated by circles, whether that was the braided bow of a bird's nest I found in a hedge, or watching the needle and vinyl record groove spiraling towards its centre. Circles have no beginning and no end. They can represent rebirth and regeneration, continuity, even infinity. They're embedded in our imagination. Okay, I'm walking a circle and it's very deliberately walking clockwise rather than auditions. I don't want to be turned into a mineral object. And this is where we begin. Maybe it's where we end too. It's actually really nice. It's like being on a giant turntable and watching the landscape revolve around me. Right now, I'm walking the circumference of castle work in Cumberland, a Neolithic stone circle dating back around 5,000 years. It's older than that megastar of stone circles, Stonehenge, but just as awe-inspiring. A ring of rocks around 30 metres across, some of them 3 metres tall, slender, leaning over me as I pass. Others seem to squat, like exhausted workers, or maybe dancers who are sitting this one out and taking a break.
I can't think of a better stone circle, actually.